want to get to the next part of my stream, and that is my review chat, at least of the first 2 episodes of The Lord of the Rings, and heavy emphasis on that chat, The Rings of Power. Now, I've kind of shared my thoughts on a number of platforms, Double Toasted, my Patreon, Discord, episode 42, which you should definitely check out. But I want to take the time to also talk about it with you guys. Have a nice, intimate conversation. We did do a watch party for these. We kind of gave our overall thoughts, but, I've had time to, sit on it, chat, to marinate, to stew on it, if you will. And I want to talk about, Lord of the Rings in general, too. But for those who don't know, like the Rings of Power, it's not adapting, Tolkien's Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy again. It's actually adapting various things from the appendices, apparently. And it takes place about 2,000-3,000 years before the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And it's about the rise of Sauron, Chad, who was a servant, a necromancer, a sorcerer, serving under Morgoth, another powerful entity trying to take control of the world and Valinor and Middle-earth. And Chad, well, Morgoth's gone, I guess. And Sauron is rising, but he's living somewhere in secret, Chad. But Galadriel, she's pissed off because her bro got killed, her brother died, chat, and she wants to lead this quest to find Sauron. People are going like, don't worry about it, it's fine, he's gone. But she's like, you don't know that. And then you have all these other characters, chat, and how do they fit into it? How does Elrond fit into it? And the proto-hobbits, the Harfoots. And what about this relationship between this sexy elf man and this sexy human woman? I don't know, we'll see how it all comes together, chat. But before I kind of get into my general thoughts on the show, but what I like and I dislike, I have a decent knowledge, I would say. I know more than the average person when it comes to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. My first exposure to the material actually came from watching the original 70s films, in particular the 70s Hobbit movie, which I love, which is far superior to the Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy, which I originally was really excited about because I was like, oh, this guy did Lord of the Rings. Of course he's going to do a great job, and it wasn't great. They just shouldn't have extended the material. It should have just been one movie. I mean, an hour, I think the original movie is like an hour and 20 minutes, and that's infinitely better than any of the Peter Jackson Hobbit movies. But that was my first exposure to it, and then eventually I saw the films in theaters, and they blew my mind. When I first saw, The Fellowship, it truly introduced me to this world, and I thought Peter Jackson did such a great job with setting it up with that prologue about what the One Ring is, and slowly introducing us to all these various characters like Gandalf and Frodo, and also kind of doing like a truncated version of the Hobbit, because they couldn't adapt that because of various licensing issues. But, I produced one of the greatest, if not the greatest, film trilogy of all time. I love the theatrical films are amazing. And the extended editions are even better. You're going to need like a week to watch them. You're going to need a very long weekend to watch them. But I highly recommend them. I try to watch them at least once a year, almost around this time, chat. This is September, but once we get into October, November, December, that's when I kind of start watching these movies. I just get in that kind of mood, right? And then after I saw the movies in the early 2000s, that's when they came out. I think it was like 2000. It was 2001, 2002, 2003, I want to say. And then I read the books, and I read The Hobbit first, and I love The Hobbit. The Hobbit that is one of my favorite books of all time. I've read it, at least a dozen times. The Lord of the Rings is a different story, where the Hobbit is very much a children's book. The Lord of the Rings is much denser. There's a lot more exposition. There's a lot more detail. I feel like the pacing is off in that. Like Tolkien was a genius, and he created many of the things that we often see in fantasy now. And all credit goes to him. But I will say the books are quite dense. I don't think they're very well paced. I read them, but I don't really have a desire to go back into those books ever again. The Hobbit, most certainly, but not so much Lord of the Rings trilogy. But still, I respect it. I absolutely respect the material. Now, then of course we after, I read those books and we got the Hobbit trilogy, and I was originally really excited. I remember when that trailer came out, I was like, oh, this looks fucking awesome. And they're singing about, the Misty Mountains, Chad, and the Lonely Mountains. Like, oh, this looks, and then we got the movies, and not great. Even though they had some perfect casting, they fucking Martin Freeman as a young Bilbo Baggins was great. And of course, famously Ian Holm played Bilbo in the original trilogy, but I was like, oh, cool. Everyone's like, yes. It all seemed like it was going to work out, but They did the thing where they extended material that didn't need to be extended, Chad. It should have been 1 3-hour movie, and it would have been perfect. It would have been great. Maybe you could have had like a little bit, like, kind of hints at Sauron and what leads into Lord of the Rings, sure, but so much of that stuff was unnecessary. And the other thing about it, the aesthetic. Peter Jackson, he got the same disease that has afflicted George Lucas and Ridley Scott and Steven Spielberg, where it's like, I know that I adhere to a specific aesthetic with these old movies, but now I have all this technology and it's making it easier. And so he had like all these CGI orcs, and when you look back in the original movies, like the orcs look better, and these, again, I just felt like it felt a little lazy. And, he burned himself out in those films, and I don't think his heart was in it. I think he has since admitted that. Yeah, he just wasn't in the right mindset for those films. And again, I can only blame him so much. I also blame the studio who just forced him to make it a trilogy when it just shouldn't have been. It should have been, some people should have been 2 movies. Like, I think it just should have been 1 film. In any case, his Lord of the Rings trilogy to me is incredible. One of the greatest film trilogies of all time. And I have a love for this property. It's cool. And so going into like the show, and Amazon acquired some of it, it's very weird. Like, I still don't have a grasp of what they own, because now the Lord of the Rings property is spread across different companies now. Like, you have the Embracer Group, which is this Swedish company, which owns some of the material, chat. And then the Tolkien estate still owns the publishing rights to the various books. But then the Tolkien estate then sold the appendices and some materials to Amazon. Like, I don't think they even sold them the Silmarillion, which I thought would be important, but they couldn't even. So I don't know. It's over. It's weird. It's very weird. And I'm sure that you can find an article that explains everything in very specific detail about like who owns what. I still don't know. All I know is that they're adapting a lot of this for the show from the various appendices. And so, when I started seeing a lot of material, they did a lot. There was a huge marketing campaign. This was probably one of the most expensive marketing campaigns for a TV show of all time. Certainly, it's the most expensive TV show of all time. Cost between, allegedly, Chad, a production budget between $500 to $750 million, Chat. 250 shy of $1 billion. It's like, that's fucking nuts, right? I think the marketing was kind of a mixed bag. Some trailers I liked. I was like, this looks cool. Certainly pretty. But now those, I was like, I don't really know, like, what's kind of going on. Where are we? Where are these characters? How are they all kind of? Because one of the things I appreciate about the original marketing for the Lord of the Rings movies, even the first film, you instantly knew who everyone was. And I'm not even saying, like, I didn't read the books, but I got a sense of who these characters were, what the mission was, what the plot was. Like in this show, in a lot of the marketing, a lot of the initial trailers, and even some of the better ones, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck this is about. What is the objective here? How is all this connecting? And I feel like they did, whoever the marketing team was for this, I don't think they did a very good job. And the trailers, I don't think did a very good job. And another thing, what bothered me is they used a lot of modern music for these trailers. And I'm like, why are you doing that? I just don't like that in general. I think that really sometimes takes, especially when it's like a period piece or it's fantastical or it's like a sci-fi film. It's like, stop fucking doing that. It's annoying. It's like when you hear sabotage, for example, in Star Trek Beyond. I was like, why? Now we find out why that's in there later on in the movie. I'm like, ugh. But it just doesn't work. It's almost like it's butting heads with the aesthetics of the film. But in any case, I still want to go in there with an open mind. Because the show was getting a lot of hate from a lot of unsavory, shitty people, Chad, who just didn't like the idea of a black elf and a black dwarf, and those peoples are pieces of shit. They're racist assholes, Chad. And I'm not bothered by a black elf or a black dwarf. I think I'm okay. I'm cool with it. Matter of fact, some of my favorite characters in this show happen to be black. I actually like the female. I actually like the black dwarf lady. She's pretty cool. But in any case, that's totally unfair. I want to go in this with an open mind. I want to judge it fairly. And I'll say, I think the as I said before, as I knew from the show's budget is on full display. Everything from the production design, the costumes, the various CGI and practical effects all work seamlessly with each other. It's great. The score is beautiful, chat. Love the score for this, for at least the first 2 episodes. But, I have to say, I do feel like there's a definite pacing and story issue right now. I think it's dealing with a lot of exposition and a lot of world building, and it's not doing it in a seamless way. And, I hate to, I have to. People say, like, you shouldn't compare it to the Jackson trilogy, but that's all we have, when it comes to a lot of adaptations of this work. Certainly the more recent adaptations, chat. in the last 20 years, we naturally have to compare it to. I think a lot of people are doing that. I think that's fair. And so when I compare like how this first episode goes, and we're just trying to set up all these different characters and worlds, I think back to that original hour of the Fellowship of the Ring and how Jackson was able to set up so many things so quickly and have these like really intimate moments. That's what certainly is missing from the first episode. Intimacy and character development. Like, you think of, like, the Fellowship of the Ring, he does the whole prologue thing about the Great War of the Second Age, defeating Sauron, Chad, at least in his physical form. He also incorporates the Hobbit, and then immediately we're in the Shire, and we're getting a sense of, like, of Gandalf's relationship with Bilbo and Frodo, and he just kind of acclimates you to those characters in the world. I'm like, this is really good. He's able to balance the big, heavy exposition stuff with the very small character stuff. And at least in the first episode, I just don't feel like they did very well. By the time we get to the second episode, I think it gets a little bit better. Now it makes sense why, because they knew themselves why they needed to release 2 episodes, which is, I was shocked. This is only an 8-episode season. I thought, I was like, oh, it's gonna be 10 or 13? It's only 8. I was like, oh, okay, you better get moving then if you only have 8 episodes. But the reason why they released that second episode is because they knew that the pacing was off in that first one, and they had some issues, and it's for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of plots going on here, and some plots are actually really interesting and cool and fun, and I'm every time we cut back to them, I think they're great. But then there's some other ones I'm like, yeah, this is not capturing my attention. Listen, I want to start with the ones I actually really, really enjoy, and I really love the Harfoot plot line. With the character of Nori and Poppy and her family. So one of the big reasons, and they're for those that don't know, the Harfoots, they're hobbits. They're hobbits. They're like, I guess you can say like they're proto-hobbits. They were the hobbits before the hobbits were like a thing in a community in a race that was recognized, right? So they're called the Harfoots, and they're kind of like this kind of very nomadic. They live in these forests, and they have, they're very in touch with nature, chat. They love good food and things. They got, shit in their hair and stuff, very dirty. But what made me attracted to them and their storyline was kind of just how wholesome it is, because they're so family oriented, but also it reminded me of the Jackson trilogy. It reminded me of my time in the Shire in that opening when Frodo and Gandalf are interacting with each other and Bilbo. It's like, I really, really, I like that. And, like Nori is that character that is very similar to Bilbo Baggins, where she has a yearning for adventure. And I naturally felt attached to that because, like, oh, shit, this reminds me of this. And I really like her character. Plus, that actress is great. That actress is really cool. And also, you bring it now, spoiler or not, I'm not sure, but one of the big things that at least ends episode 1 in a very interesting way is that you have this meteor crashing down to Middle Earth, and inside this meteor, Chad, is a man, who I believe is Derpy Gandalf. I mean, people have all their various fan theories as to who he actually is, and, I think they're all legitimate. It could be anybody, whether it be Gandalf or Sauron himself, Chad. I think it's really cool. But I like that mission because, again, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of connected to this. And she's also trying to take care of this, 7-foot-tall giant man baby who doesn't know anything, but clearly is very, very powerful. I'm like, this is a cool mystery, and I already like her because of her natural curiosity and charisma. So the Harfoot storyline, at least at this point, is my favorite. I really like that. Other than that one, I also really like the stuff with Elrond, Celebrimbor. Even though Celebrimbor was not in it, I know who Celebrimbor is, thanks to the video games. I'm like, oh, I know that motherfucker. But Elrond and the dwarves, which are introduced in episode 2. They're not in episode 1, but they're in episode 2. And with Prince Durin and his whole family. I feel like the dwarves are just naturally interesting because they have really big personalities. They're brash. They're fun-loving. They're very blunt. And I just like seeing their community and things, how everything works. Like, again, the aesthetics of this show are gorgeous, both the practical and the CGI. That's great. But I also but it was what was missing in that first episode, which I didn't feel like it was there, especially when we get to the elf characters who I feel like are definitely dragging this show down. I'm like, listen, I know you're fucking immortal. I know you have everything, but can you stop being so goddamn glum all the time? It's like, Jesus Christ, just fucking let's inject some personality here. But I love the conversation between Elrond and Prince Durin, and Durin's upset that Elrond hasn't visited him in 20 years. And Elrond's like, what's the big deal? Durin's like, well, 20 years is a blink of the eye to you, but for us, for me, that's a lifetime. I got married, I had children, you weren't there for any of that, man. He's like, oh, so it's kind of cool that it kind of makes the elves look like a bunch of dicks, because they kind of are. And so I really like that. And then we meet, and by the way, everyone's complaining about we have a black dwarf. Well, the character that plays Disa, chat, the actress that plays Disa, she's great. She's one of my favorite parts in the goddamn show, because she brings in that personality that I need for this series. And I don't care that she's a black dwarf. She's just fun. She's fun. And I love the dynamic between her husband and Elrond. And, it was like, there was warmth coming from her. And I really dug her character a lot. Disa's great. So anyone complained about Disa, get over it. She didn't have she had some hair. She had some tufts of hair, chat. But I'm like, listen, I'm not going to be upset that the female dwarves choose the shave. Well, they want to have thick beards, It's gonna look a little weird, So I can see why it's like this. It's fine, whatever. I didn't mind. I know Tolkien has said the female and male dwarves are indistinguishable from each other. You can't even tell. It's like I'm not bothered by that, But to each their own. I thought it was a fun part. But then we get into some of the stories which I feel like are a little lackluster. They have potential. Like the one that I'm in the middle of, I'm kind of like, okay. I mean, well, there's some fun stuff in it, but that's the one with the Arondir and Brownwyn. That's the sexy elf man and the sexy human woman. Feels very reminiscent of Aragorn and Arwen from the original trilogy, chat. Like this romance that's not meant to be and shouldn't be. But it does set up some really cool. Well, one, it just kind of sets up like, okay, what is the relationship between humans and elves? Because they do not get along, chat. They do not like each other. But another part of it is you also set up like the whole thing of the orcs, and we get some really interesting things here, which I didn't expect, like some cool horror moments in this episode, which also kind of harkened back to Peter Jackson's original Lord of the Rings trilogy. He had some horror moments too, since he was also a horror director, at least for some films. But I like the stuff with the orcs. They definitely brought back the practicality with them, which I'm glad they did, because I was not a fan of the heavy CGI orcs that we got in the Hobbit trilogy. So let's go back to practical effects. And they even set up some scenes. There are even some scenes, we talked about this in Discord Discourse, that is very reminiscent of someone like Sam Raimi's directing style. Like how he shoots things. I was like, this is kind of cool. I was like, I really dug that. And so aesthetically, I like those scenes. The plot, between them, it's like, all right, well, either it's going to work out or it won't work out. Kind of know, it's going to be one of those two things. And then the whole thing of her son, who... is that their son? I don't know. Because one thing I noticed, Chad, like, is that's the MCU. You raised a good point. Because it's this whole, like, have they been together? Or are they, they not saying? Because that kid, I noticed, Chad, have they ever showed his ears? He has this long hair, and they're covering his ears constantly. He's like, is he half elf? I don't know. But they set up something cool with him with, like, a sword, with a cool, savvy, like, Sauron sword that feeds on blood. I'm like, that's pretty cool. I want to see what happens there. But, we'll see with that. But then the plot line that I'm just not, this is just not very paced very well. And matter of fact, by the time we got to episode 2, I forgot it was even a part of the show. And that's the stuff of Galadriel, which, the series opens up of Galadriel. This is a very different Galadriel than we're used to. This is not the Galadriel that we see in the trilogy, who is this almost kind of ethereal figure and also has like this darkness inside of her. Like this Galadriel's, again, she's very motivated because of the death of her brother, which at the same time, like, I get that. I just didn't feel like we spent enough time with the brother to make me feel like that's the one thing. It feels like they're trying to fast track so many things, and yet at the same time, it's not paced well. It's very odd, especially with her character. But I get her mission. She's trying to find Sauron, got to kill Sauron, all that, and she's like, well, all the elves are like, just get over it. He's gone. Don't worry about it. He's dead. And she's like, I don't think he's dead. And that's her thing. That's her motivation. I feel like she just needs more. She needs more than that. Because every scene that she's in, she's like, Sauron! And the Elrond's like, take it easy. And then they talk to the Elf King. She's like, Sauron! And he's like, we're going to send you to Elf Heaven, all right? And then she's on the boat, Sauron! It's like, okay. All right. Okay. And then we get to episode 2 when she's hanging out with, like, the people. Like, I was literally watching the scene. I was doing the watch party with you guys. I told you this. I was watching that scene, and they're going back and forth between, the two of them. I'm like, I literally didn't even know what they were talking about. Because I just feel like it just wasn't that interesting. And so that's the big plot line where I'm like, okay, you gotta put some pep in your step with this one, because it's really not working for the other ones are to various degrees. But yeah, it's not a perfect start. Not a perfect start. It has a lot of potential, Chad. Believe me, it has a lot of potential. So I'm not gonna be like one of those people that's gonna write it off or I'm thinking this is horrible or anything like that. It's like, no, there's some legitimately great stuff in here to appreciate. And I'm glad, and I'm hoping, certainly by midway through, like, because I get the sense, like, okay, all these characters are going to come together, right, at one point. Like, it's kind of like The Fellowship, kind of like the original movies where they all come together, like, okay, we got to deal with this thing. Because I feel like if they keep it separate, then it's not, that connective tissue is just not going to be there. It's going to be a little awkward for me. So I hope we all kind of have them come together, because that's what I want. That's what I expect. We'll eventually see. I don't know. But I'm still going to keep watching, Chad. We're still going to do watch parties for this series. But I want to come in there. I want to share my thoughts on it. You know, if I were to give this a rating, I kind of gave my truncated version of my thoughts on the most recent episode of the Sunday Service on Double Toasted. You know, I would give this it's a matinee so far. Like, it's not, I don't think it's awful. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. But I think it needs to address some things. And I think it might be taking a little too much time to do so. So we'll see. I kind of want to come back to this and review this again by the time we get to maybe like episode 4 and 5, kind of like a midway through review. And then eventually, once all 8 episodes are done, do another review of the entire first season or series. And I'm sure Amazon wants to make this into a long-running TV show, Chad, dealing with the rise of Sauron. But we'll see. But yeah, I would give this matinee solid, but not perfect, Chad, not perfect. But what about the rest of you guys? How do you feel about the Rings of Power? I'm very curious. Are you liking what you see? Are you not liking what you see? Are you more kind of like mixed like me? Like, there's some good stuff, there's some bad stuff. What about you guys? Let me hear from you, chat. Let's see here. Did you explain the relationship? Are they dating? Is that the kids? Sorry, I didn't explain. The show did not. I don't think they explained the relationship very well. That's the other thing. Like, what is the deal here? I don't think it did. Like with Arendir and Bronwyn. I don't know. Clearly they love each other. They want to fuck. They're the two hottest. That's the other thing too. One thing I like about this show is that it makes humans look like a bunch of fucking slobs. Like, we just look like we fucking stink constantly. It's like, oh my God, we are the worst. And yet the only person who doesn't look like they stink is the sexy people. Like Bronwyn, her farts smell like roses, Chad, I'm sure. Like, out of all the humans in her village, she's the only one that's attractive. All the other humans are gross, which I found very funny. All the elves are sexy. That's the other thing. Like the elves are just fucking boring. It's like, oh my God, you're so perfect. And then what I do appreciate though about the show is they're also showing them sometimes where, like, because they view themselves as that way, as like, oh, we're infallible. It's like, oh no, you have some flaws. You do have some flaws. And I thought that's pretty cool. I did like that. I think when we did Discord, Stefan brought that up, and he was right. You know, it kind of shows that the fact that elves are immortal, they don't consider like what time means to people because time is nothing to them. It's like, that's pretty good. I like that. They lack a lot of self-awareness, and I hope that's brought up more often in the show. Let me see what else you guys are saying right now. Just looking. Oh, I think the Galadriel plot is literally lost at sea. God, it is, yeah. Literally and figuratively. I love the way the show is going. This is not tech good. But yeah, I agree. I want them to form a kind of fellowship. Anyway, remember what happens after the rings are formed with Isildur. There's a lot of epic battles coming. Isildur's in the show, right? He's already been cast. A lot of good drama to do. You're right. It may be pacing issue, but they still have. No, they do. They have a lot to cover. You know, I just I hope they can get there. Actually, I really love the show. But yeah, it won't just be rise. It'll also be the initial fall of Sauron. Oh, I didn't know that. I'm with This Is Horse, says Chris Ayers. I'm saying, right, I like it so far. I give it a high matinee. See, man, it's all right. Yes, I like it lots of her. Cautiously optimistic. It is not lore accurate. It really can't be, but I think it's a spear of the legendarium, and it's authentic to the lore. Casey, I would encourage people to check out the show. Like, I would never say people not to watch something. I think it's worthwhile. I think it's worth checking out. But be aware that in that first episode, it is not paced very well. It's not a little slow. It is slow. In terms of the powers, not including immortality, elf or dwarf. My whole thing is, like, what I would want to be. I talked about this. I'd be a hobbit. I would straight up be a fucking hobbit. You know, I do not want to be an elf. Elf, because the thing is, I said this before. Yes, you're immortal, and you have everything at your disposal, but you're always fucking miserable. Like, the elves are such, they're such sticks in the mud. It's like, oh my God. And so I would much rather be any of the other races. I'd rather be, either man, I'd rather be just regular old me. I'd rather be a hobbit, 100% hobbit. Hobbit's got it down. There's like, that's a life well lived to me. Comfort, good food, good people, family oriented. You know, bacon shit, eating cake all that's like, yes. How many breakfasts? Like second breakfast, chat, dinner, supper, 11sies? Yes. I want to be a hobbit, 100%. Dwarf might be fun. Dwarf might be fun for a while, but hobbit all the way. Elves are sexy, yeah. I assume soap has not been invented. I don't think so. The elves invented soap, I guess. When you slammed that orc in the tail, got made. Yeah, that was Evil Dead. That was strip. It was a Dutch angle too. That was a Sam Raimi shot. I was like, wait a minute. Even when that happened, I was like, did Sam Raimi direct that? Oh. Let's see here. Batboy, that's why I like the elves and Elder Scrolls. Are all high and mighty. They're racist, while also victims of racism. You have the dark elves living in the ghettos of Windhelm. And you have the Thalmor trying to force Nords to not worship their gods. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's a slow burn, so Xavier. Love the elves and the Elder Scrolls. It will end. It will end when the ring is lost or around when Gollum finds it. Right? You imagine that'll be like you think that the last shot of the show, if it continues on, right? The last shot of the show will be Gollum finding the ring. I could see that. That'd be cool. I'm definitely checking the show. Now, keep an eye on pacing. Yeah, let me know. Hobbits are living the life with their 7,000. Hell fucking yeah. Second breakfast, chat. Got to have a light breakfast in the beginning and have a heartier breakfast later on. Oh, powers and elves? Oh, I mean, in terms of powers, that'd probably an elf. Yeah. But dwarfs got some cool shit. But I want to be happy. I want to be happy. Hobbits sound cool. You like 35 meals a day and smoke weed. Yeah, they smoke fucking weed, chat. It's like, that's the life you want to live. There it is. Gandalf knew. That's why Gandalf's like, I want to hang out with the hobbits. All these other people are just, so miserable. Learn how to make magic stuff. Aside from wizard, I'd be a human ranger. I like dwarves because they are always discovering something. That's true. They're always mining. I want to see the sun, though. I want to go outside. Michigan, where that Lord of the Rings lore is very interesting, but I think I'll wait until the series finishes. That's fair. It's all at once. Yeah, watch it all at once. I think that's probably a smart way to do it. I'll do nothing but eat and smoke weed all day. I'd be a hobbit. 100%. Yeah, man. Do it. Bro, you should play a halfling bard in D&D and just sing, dance like Scanlan. Nope, yep. Not halfling, but still, yeah. I love it. Let's see what else is saying. Yeah, don't waste money on shoes. I have these big fucking feet. Hell yeah. I was like, they don't have diabetes. They're whatever their systems, Chad, their intestines, they're able to process all that shit. They seem to be, they figured it out. Yeah. I'm too tall to be a hobbit, but not tall enough to be a dwarf. I'd be one hobbit with olive skin. Ooh. Yes, Chad. Yeah, like the Harfoots. Of darker skin. The Tolkien literally says they are of darker skin. Of brown skin. The worst thing about being, there's no hobbits that are black. It's like, get over yourself. Worst thing about being a hobbit is the potential wizard visiting you and literally ruining your life. But the chances of that are met. That's true. It only happened to, 2? Well, Bilbo, Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin. 5. It happened to 5 of them. That's not too bad. More of a crab-based breakfast and more meat-based. Ooh, I love it. Seafood, and then meat. I love it. Bilbo's Gandalf's sweet tea pretty much is. Keep telling yourself, Chris, those are some plump-looking hobbits I've ever seen. No, they are plump-looking. There's no doubt. Well, even the books, they describe them as like Frodo and Sam as fat. And I was like, yeah. Little plump hobbits. They know how to live life, Chad. That's my thing. That's why I want to hobbit all the goddamn way. They figure it out. Because the men of the world, humans, they're just smelly. They just humans look miserable. Elves they got a lot, but they're still miserable. Dwarves might be like a second for me. If I'm not a hobbit, maybe I'll be a dwarf. But at the same time, I like to go outside. They're always in the goddamn, in the the mines and the mountains and everything. Yeah. Elves. I don't think elves even eat meat. Elves don't even eat meat and they eat fucking leaves. Eat leaves in that bread. No, they do eat that shitty bread. Diggy hole. Yes. Anyway, chat. But yeah, no, listen, I do suggest people should check out the show. You know, it's not perfect. It has a couple issues right now, but there's some stuff to, I think, to really to appreciate, hell, even love. And there's a cool little mystery, especially with, you know, the Harfoot Nori, who's probably my favorite character so far, and Derpy Gandalf. I don't know if that's Gandalf, chat, but I'm going to call him Derpy Gandalf. So we'll see. We shall